My HOA president thought a bogus neighborhood rule was all she needed to have my boat illegally towed away. She called the cops on me, threatened lawsuits, and laughed in my face when she thought she'd won. What this yacht club princess didn't seem to grasp was that my boat dock sits on a waterway governed by something a little bigger than her petty rules, the laws of the United States. And when the Coast Guard showed up, they didn't just put her in her place. They gave her a masterclass in jurisdiction that brought her little kingdom crashing down. Before we get into the glorious details of how I turned this Karen's worst nightmare into a reality, do me a favor and drop a comment below with where you're watching from. I'm always amazed by how far these stories travel. And hey, if you enjoy watching bullies get what's coming to them, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss what's next. My story kicks off about 3 years after I left the service. After 20 years in the Coast Guard, specializing in maritime engineering, I was ready for some peace and quiet. My dad had passed a few years earlier, leaving me the house I grew up in, a modest place on a tidal channel that fed right into the Atlantic. It came with a small private dock and, more importantly, his boat, the Salty Dog. She wasn't some fancy yacht, just a classic 28-foot cabin cruiser from the 70s. But she was my dad's pride and joy, and I'd spent a year restoring her to her former glory. Every inch of that boat, from the polished chrome to the rebuilt engine, was a tribute to him. That boat wasn't just property. It was family history, moored right there at my own dock. For the first couple of years, life was perfect. The neighbors were great, retirees, young families, a few fellow vets. We'd wave, share a beer on the weekends, and just enjoyed our little slice of paradise. The HOA was mostly a formality, collecting dues for landscaping and the community park. It was a live and let live kind of place. And then, Brenda was elected HOA president. Brenda and her husband had moved into a huge new house at the end of the cul-de-sac about a year before. You know, the type reeking of new money and entitlement. Brenda drove her white Range Rover like a tank and seemed on a mission to find things to be offended by. The first newsletter under her leadership was a sign of things to come. Suddenly, there were new, strictly enforced rules about the approved shades of beige for mailbox posts and the maximum height for lawn gnomes. She was a one-woman reign of terror, patrolling the neighborhood with a clipboard and a measuring tape. People started getting fines for things that had been fine for 20 years. A pink flamingo? That's $100 fine. A basketball hoop left out overnight? $200. I just kept my head down, paid my dues, and kept my lawn immaculate, figuring she had no reason to bother me. I was wrong. The Salty Dog, my pride and joy, was about to become the center of her universe. It started with a casual comment. I was out on the dock polishing a brass cleat when Brenda came power walking down the community path. She stopped, put her hands on her hips, and stared at my boat. You know, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, it's a real shame. These are million-dollar views, and then there's that. I looked from my beautiful boat to her sneering face. That, I said calmly, is the Salty Dog, my father's boat. Right? She sniffed. Well, the board is discussing a new rule about long-term watercraft storage. A boat that just sits here can be considered an eyesore. It brings down the whole aesthetic. I just stared at her. It doesn't just sit here, Brenda. I use it. And this is my private dock, on my private property. She laughed. We'll see what the HOA's lawyer says about that. 2 weeks later, the first official letter arrived. It was a formal notice of violation. Citing a brand new rule I'd never seen or voted on, it declared that any vessel moored for more than 72 consecutive hours was in violation. The letter claimed my boat, which hadn't moved in a week while I did some engine tuning, was an aesthetic nuisance. I was ordered to remove it or face a fine of $250 per day. I had to laugh at the absurdity. I wrote a polite but firm letter back. I explained that while the HOA could create rules about our properties, their authority had limits. I pointed out that my dock was on a navigable waterway, and they had no legal right to unilaterally declare my boat a nuisance and have it towed. I suggested they consult an actual maritime lawyer before they embarrassed themselves further. I even included a copy of my vessel's federal documentation. I thought logic would prevail. But I was dealing with a Karen. And to her, facts are just inconvenient. The next week, a second letter arrived from the HOA's law firm. It was a final notice giving me 48 hours to remove the boat, or the HOA would have the nuisance abated. They would, of course, bill me for the towing and legal fees. The daily fines were already pushing $4,000. They were serious. This wasn't a neighborhood dispute anymore. This was a declaration of war. Brenda was doubling down. The day after the lawyer's letter, a police cruiser pulled up. Brenda was on the sidewalk, pointing dramatically at my boat, playing the part of the concerned citizen. I walked out to meet the two officers. "Sir, is this your property?" The older officer asked. "It is," I said. "And that's my boat." Brenda jumped in. "Officer, this man is refusing to remove this abandoned boat. It's a violation and a hazard. It could leak oil or sink." I looked at the officers. "The boat is neither abandoned nor a hazard. It's my personal property at my private dock. This is a civil disagreement with my HOA, and with all due respect, it's not a police matter." The older officer sighed. "Sir, your boat looks fine. I don't see a hazard. Is it leaking anything?" "No, sir. Her bilge is bone dry." He turned to Brenda. "Ma'am, we can't make him move his boat. This is a civil matter. If you believe he's violating a covenant, your recourse is through the courts, not us." Brenda turned beet red. "So you're not going to do anything?" "I am the president of this homeowners association. There is no criminal violation here, ma'am," the officer said, his patience gone. He and his partner left, leaving Brenda fuming. The look she gave me was pure venom. I knew then she was going to try and make an example of me, and that's when I decided to stop playing defense. It was time to build my trap. This is where my 20 years in the Coast Guard came in handy. Brenda and her lawyers thought their HOA bylaws were the supreme law of the land. What they failed to understand is that her authority ended at the water's edge. I spent the next couple of days preparing. I printed out NOAA charts showing our channel as a federally recognized navigable waterway. I printed the sections of the U.S. Code defining federal jurisdiction. I pulled the records for the Salty Dog, showing it was a federally documented vessel. That's a key point. It puts the boat on a national registry and gives it a specific legal status. Then I made the most important call. I didn't call 911. I called the non-emergency number for the local Coast Guard Sector Command and was routed to the duty officer. "Coast Guard Sector Charleston, Chief Petty Officer Evans speaking. Chief, my name is Mark Rivera. I'm a retired senior chief. I'm calling to give a courtesy heads up about a potential situation." I used the lingo to establish my credibility. "Go ahead, senior chief," he said, his tone shifting with professional respect. "I have a U.S. documented vessel moored at my residence. My HOA has threatened to hire a commercial company to remove it without my consent. I've informed them they have no legal authority, but the president seems determined." There was a pause. "Let me get this straight. An HOA is planning to hire a civilian company to remove a documented vessel from a navigable waterway without the owner's permission or a court order." "That's my assessment, Chief," I said. I could hear him typing. "That would be a very unwise move," he said dryly. "The liability for them and the tow company would be immense. Look, we can't intervene in a civil dispute. But if a commercial operation starts a confrontation on the water or obstructs the channel, that can become a matter of federal interest. We have patrols in your area. Let's just say we'll maintain situational awareness." That was all I needed. He wasn't sending the cavalry. He was just acknowledging that a line was about to be crossed. The trap was set. I just had to wait. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, my neighbor Tom texted me. "Mark, you won't believe this. There's a big towboat at the end of the channel, and Brenda is on the dock talking to the captain. Looks like they're heading your way." I smiled. Showtime. I walked out to my dock. Sure enough, a commercial towboat was slowly making its way down the channel. On its bow was a burly captain, and on my dock, with a smug, triumphant grin, was Brenda, holding her clipboard like a royal scepter. Several neighbors were on their own docks, watching the spectacle she had orchestrated. Well, 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 Brenda called out. I told you, Mark. You were given final notice. I ignored her and looked at the towboat captain, who was getting ready to throw a line. Morning, I said calmly. Can I help you? Contracted by the HOA to remove this vessel, he grunted, gesturing to the salty dog. I'm the owner, I said. I don't consent to it being moved. This is a U.S. documented vessel on a navigable waterway. Do you have a court order authorizing you to seize my property? The captain froze. He looked from me to Brenda, a flicker of uncertainty on his face. This was language he understood far better than HOA rules. Court orders. Jurisdiction. Brenda scoffed. Don't listen to him. He's making things up. I have the contract. You are legally obligated to remove this boat. The captain looked at me. Is this thing really federally documented? Official number 6-8-3-2-5-1. I said. Her name is the Salty Dog. My name is Mark Rivera, and I'm telling you, as a retired Coast Guard senior chief, that if you attach a line to my vessel without a court order, you and your company could be liable for illegal seizure and conversion of private property. Are you insured for that kind of lawsuit? The captain's face went pale. He knew exactly what I was talking about. Towing a car from a parking lot is one thing. Messing with a documented vessel on a federal waterway without the right paperwork is a whole different world of liability. A lawsuit like that could bankrupt him. He turned to Brenda. Ma'am, he's right. If this boat is documented, I can't touch it without a court order. My insurance would drop me in a heartbeat. I could lose my license. Brenda's face contorted with rage. What? I am paying you. I am the president. And that's when it happened. From the main channel, another boat appeared. It was a 29-foot Coast Guard response boat. Its orange hull and flashing blue light unmistakable. It pulled up quietly, holding its position between the towboat and my dock. A chief petty officer stood calmly at the bow. He didn't yell. He just spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. Good morning, folks. Coast Guard. We got a heads up about a potential conflict on the waterway. Just making sure everything is okay. He looked at the towboat captain. Captain, what are your intentions? The tow captain immediately put his hands up. No intentions, Chief. None at all. We were just leaving. A misunderstanding with the client. The chief nodded slowly. Then he turned his gaze to Brenda. It was the calm, dissecting gaze of a man who deals with fools for a living. Ma'am, he said, are you the party who contracted this tow? Brenda was sputtering. Ah, yes. He is in violation of the rules. That boat is an eyesore. The chief let out a long breath. Ma'am, let me be very clear. This channel is a federal waterway. That boat is a U.S. documented vessel. The authority of an HOA does not permit you to unilaterally seize property from these waters. Your legal recourse is through the civil courts. By attempting to bypass that process, you are creating a serious legal problem for yourself and your contractor. I would advise you and your HOA to cease and desist immediately and consult with competent legal counsel. Brenda stood there, mouth agape, her clipboard hanging limply. Her face was chalky white with humiliation. Every neighbor had heard every word. The towboat captain was already firing up his engine, eager to get away. The Coast Guard chief gave me a short, almost imperceptible nod, and their boat turned back toward the main channel. Brenda was left on my dock, utterly defeated. Her power play had been crushed by an authority so far above her she couldn't even comprehend it. She scurried away, the eyes of the entire neighborhood burning into her back. The fallout was even more satisfying than I could have imagined. The towboat company sent the HOA a bill for their time and a letter stating they would no longer accept contracts from them, citing misrepresentation of legal authority. But the real magic came a week later. I received a copy of a letter, anonymously slipped into my mailbox. It was from the HOA's law firm to Brenda and the board. It was a masterpiece of legal panic. The lawyers stated that her reckless and unilateral actions had exposed the HOA to catastrophic and potentially uninsurable liability. They used phrases like willful disregard for jurisdictional boundaries and inviting litigation. They formally terminated their representation, effective immediately. This letter spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People were furious, not at me but at Brenda. They realized her vendetta could have cost every homeowner a fortune. The final nail in her coffin was the HOA's insurance. After being notified by the board's own, now former, lawyers about the incident, the insurance carrier raised the HOA's premium by 300% at renewal, citing gross negligence by a board member. An emergency meeting was called. Brenda didn't even show up. She was voted off the board unanimously. Her husband resigned as treasurer the next day. A few months later, a for sale sign went up in their yard. They were gone. The new HOA board is made up of reasonable people, including my neighbor Tom. The first thing they did was rescind all of Brenda's ridiculous rules. They sent me a formal apology and wiped the bogus fines from my account. And me? I'm still here. On quiet evenings, I sit on the deck of the Salty Dog, enjoying a cold beer. The neighborhood is back to normal, and I have the satisfaction of knowing that I didn't just win a fight. I protected my father's legacy, and I brought a petty tyrant's reign to an end by calmly using a tool she never knew existed, the law. And that, my friends, is how a little bit of knowledge and one well-placed phone call can stop a power-tripping HOA Karen in her tracks. It just goes to show that the biggest bully on the playground is often no match for someone who has actually read the rulebook. If you have your own HOA nightmare story, I want to hear it. Share it in the comments below. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next story.